You're listening to the Back Home Network, presented by Home Field Apparel.
And welcome, Hoosier fans, to this week's edition of Assembly Call Radio, where each week we discuss the most important topics in the world of Indiana basketball. This is our 327th edition of Assembly Call Radio and our 1019th episode overall of the Assembly Call, recorded on the evening of February 29th, 2024. I'm your host, Andy Bottoms. And let's begin this edition of the Assembly Call how we begin every edition of the Assembly Call, and that is with our Hoosier Proud banner moment. All right, well, this week's banner moment was written by Jared, who did a nice job of trying to write this as if I was, but I don't want to take credit for someone else's work here. But it did occur on Tuesday night against Wisconsin when Trey Galloway delivered his 12th assist in a 74-70 victory for the Hoosiers. And what was so special about that 12th assist? Well, it added Trey's name to a list that includes only one other name, and that name is IU basketball royalty. Only Trey Galloway and Isaiah Thomas have authored two 12-assist games in the same season. In addition to his 12 dimes against the Badgers, Trey also dished out 12 against Northwestern. And he's now averaging 6.6 assists per game across Indiana's last 8 contests, and his assist rate in conference play is 28.4%, which is 7th in the conference. For context, that's the same assist rate that Yogi Ferrell had during the 2016 Big Ten title season. Now you may be saying, hang on, Khalil Ware did put up 27, 11, and 5 on 11 of 12 shooting, and that's certainly more impressive than Trey dishing out 12 assists, and certainly that's true. But this is the banner moment, and not even Jared could conjure up a scenario in which this IU team hangs a banner this season. But please don't tempt him, and because no one needs to hear that. But with Khalil's stats being great, his development is unlikely to impact an NCAA tournament run, other than hopefully attracting the next great big to Indiana. But Trey is someone that we all hope to be back in the Cream and Crimson next season, and despite some rumors that circulated last week, Trey being a Hoosier next season remains the most likely outcome regardless of who the coach is. And while no one would feel comfortable entering a season with Trey Galloway penciled in as a starting point guard, he is starting to show a much more advanced ability to create offense for his teammates, and that will pay dividends moving forward no matter what his role on next year's IU team ends up being. All right. Let me introduce my co-host for this week. Jared will hopefully be joining us a little later. His wife is out celebrating the completion of an insanely busy month at work. And Jared wasn't about to bother her with kid bedtimes just so he could join us sitting in front of our computers to complain about basketball. And while he isn't going to nominate himself for our new Husband Hustle Award, I will. I mean, what a guy. Truly, the Gabe Cups of husbands right there. Not a lot of actual production you can point to, but he's doing the little things that make a household function. And no, none of this writing on the run sheet has been done by Jared himself. I'm ad-libbing all of it, obviously, and that's why they call me the Ron Burgundy of bracketology. Okay, here with me tonight, we do have a longtime high school basketball coach in the state of Indiana, the founder of Delphi Bracketology, and the man now affectionately referred to as the People's Podcast host. He also knows how to celebrate a big win in your rival's gym, and it's the coach.
He remembers the days when a movie cost $1. Heaven help you if you ever decide to.
All right, I'm going to talk. I don't know, again, what's happening.
We hear it. We hear it. You're good.
Oh, you hear it? Okay. It's not coming through my speakers. But anyway.
It's over.
Talking through. I tell you what, I got to double check all my stuff here. But anyway, we got to win. That's nice. We had something positive to talk about Indiana basketball this week. That's good. Let's hope we get another one on Sunday. That's kind of what the focus is going to be. I know there's an uproar about recruiting. There's an uproar about the state of the program. We're going to get into that into the second segment. And it's disappointing that we're here at 15-13 and have to have this conversation in year 3, and we'll get into all the details. But again, celebrate the positives. We're on a 1-game winning streak, and we have the 3 games left. We can build a little momentum for the Big Ten tournament.
All right. And also here we have a senior writer for The Big Lead, a proud uncle, and the only one of us to ever inspire a community member to fantasize about his head literally exploding on air. Ladies and gentlemen, the red meat ranter. I have no idea where that came from. Must be missing something there. Ryan Phillips.
Analyzing players, finding every wrinkle. He hasn't ever hosted, never lifted a finger. He's got all the
Well, let me
answers.
quickly add just one thing about this.
Dude just interrupted his own jingle.
Don't worry, Coach, that worked. Look, I think that a lot of people are talking about a lot of things. I'm happy with the win the other night, and we talked about that after the show, that, it's okay to enjoy a win even in a bad season, and even with a lot of drama going on in the program. We're going to talk tonight sort of the state of the program, and I think that we all need to be really honest about that, and we've all had our opinions about certain aspects of it, and I think that we'll be able to get it all out tonight. But that doesn't take away from the fact that, as Andy mentioned, Trey Galloway had a great game, Khalil Ware had a great game, and they were able to beat a team that Indiana traditionally has a tough time beating. And so feel good about that. Hopefully you can go on the road to Maryland and maybe get another win, because it's been a long time since we've all felt a little bit of joy around this program. And so it was genuinely nice. I think some fans didn't really know how to react to that win the other night. And it's because we hadn't had one in a while that maybe they weren't supposed to win, and they did. So we'll talk about all that stuff tonight. People have been asking us to talk about it. People have been asking me to talk about it. And I think we'll talk about that tonight. And we're not the people making the decisions. So we're just going to give our opinions of where we're at.
All right. Well, Jared, like I said, will hopefully be joining us here shortly. But tonight, on Hoosier Headlines, we've got a quick look ahead to the Maryland game on Sunday. Then, as we said, we'll kind of talk about the state of the program. I know we have traditionally tried to talk about more macro things here on the Thursday night show. So that's what we'll do there. And then we got some questions from the mailbag. All of that is coming up this week on Assembly Call Radio. And now it's time to talk about our presenting sponsor.
Home field apparel. Wear one for the team.
And this edition of Assembly Call Radio, just like all shows on the Back Home Network, is brought to you by our friends at Home Field Apparel, where they have the largest collection of vintage IU apparel that you'll find anywhere. And it's not just IU, but as all of you know, they did just have a recent IU refresh, more Bison merchandise, which you can't really go wrong with, the Hyper sweatshirt, lots of more great IU stuff. And then they recently rolled out their racing collection. So they have a number of things there. And then even today, which this might really be where Jared is, they rolled out some new Virginia merchandise, although they didn't have anything specific to Ty Jerome. So it may or may not be what he's actually doing. But we've Coach sporting the Indiana Hyper sweatshirt. I mean, probably your first purchase, I would guess, in the last week or so was that sweatshirt. But they've got all kinds of great IU stuff. From that Hyper sweatshirt, I've got the controversial in some circles oval on, but you know that no matter what you buy, it'll be comfortable. The colors will last through many washings, and you're supporting an Indiana-based company that came up through the Kelley School of Business, and what could be better than that? So go to homefieldapparel.com and use our promo code HOME23 to get 15% off your entire first order. That's promo code HOME23 for 15% off. Once again, the website is homefieldapparel.com. Wear one for the team. They may need to get better models than Coach and I, but that's neither here nor there. So we'll just move on. All
Connor,
right.
I'm available.
Well, let's not.
Whoa.
Easy.
He said better.
Easy.
Come on now.
I like how you tried to adjust your hair when you said that. That was really something. Okay.
Because they're going to
Anyway.
screenshot it for the profile picture. So
Absolutely. All right. Who's your headlines? So NIT bracketology was listed on here. I think if IU wins another couple games, I think you can have a more realistic conversation about that. But I think until then, probably not worth the time to do. And then you get to the Maryland game. So that comes up on Sunday. It's been a long time since IU played Maryland, but way back on December 1st. If you'll recall, the season was much different then. But IU had a number of guys, 4 guys in double figures over the course of that game. Khalil had 18 and 12. had a really big game. Mackenzie Mbako, as I recall, he ended up with 13 points in the game. This was one of the early games where he really started to get into a rhythm. I felt like, and maybe one where he started to turn the corner. Trey Galloway, 12.6 assists. And it was a game that IU really controlled pretty well. Did let Maryland get back in it a little bit down the stretch as IU struggled with their they pressed a bit toward the end of the game, and IU had a little bit of trouble with that in what was, I believe, one of the first games without Xavier Johnson during that stretch. So again, long time ago, we'll see, but IU did win that game by 12 points on December 1st. As I mentioned, Xavier Johnson did not play. His last game at Maryland 2 years ago, one of his best in an IU uniform. And in this one, Maryland was a crisp 2 of 16 from 3-point range, and IU was 3 of 9, but 10 of 8 from the free throw, or 10 of 18 from the free throw line. So maybe a harbinger of what was to come for IU. Turnovers, as I mentioned, were an issue. Some of those coming late with 16 turnovers for IU in that game. But one of IU's better defensive efforts, holding Maryland to 0.8 points per possession. From a Maryland perspective, they've been a bit up and down, although more down than up, I would say. Of late, they've lost. They're 2-6 in their last 8 games, I want to say, losing most recently to Northwestern on Wednesday night, and they've got just 2 games left. IU, then they've got the week off before they finish at Penn State. They're currently 15-14, 7-11 in the league. Coach, what are your keys to this game? Looking ahead to to Maryland. Not sure how much Maryland you've watched over the course of doing bracketology work this season. They have not been in that picture for a little while, at least now, but probably have played some teams that are. So impressions of Maryland at this point in the season, and maybe a key to the game looking ahead to Sunday.
Yeah, I think it's, if I remember right to the first game, it's a pretty good matchup if they're still struggling from 3 because of the rim protection and the inside presence of Ware. I think it bodes well for Indiana to win this game with a little bit better defense than what they've played in the past. So I think that's one of the better matchups. Indiana gets in trouble when they have they have the quick guard in Young, but he's even a scorer in the lane more than he is a three-point shooter, I believe. So it's the reason why they were able to win in game 1. They were able to lock down the offensive sets of Maryland, force some threes, and Maryland wasn't a good three-point shooting team at that point, and I still don't think they are. So it's a matchup where Indiana can win, and I think they have an advantage. Obviously, anytime they can go inside, they have an advantage. I think that plays well here at Maryland, but it's on the road, and winning on the road in the Big Ten has been tough for this program. It's just tough for anyone. Nebraska goes into Ohio State and loses tonight on the road, so it's going to be difficult. But you win this game by defending and rebounding, and then being able to do multiple things again on offensive. I think this is a game which Indiana likes to be at the rim. I think they have the advantage in talent and that, and I'm not predicting a win because of the road, but it is a game that Indiana surely can compete in.
Yeah, if you look, as you said, 3-point shooting, they're currently ranked 354th in the nation in 3-point shooting, 28.2%. Have really struggled offensively. Their efficiency numbers are not good on that end. The best things that they do are hit the offensive glass and get fouled and get to the free throw line. So that'll be something that, IU, who's gotten themselves into some foul trouble at times. What I will say about Maryland is they are currently 5th, as I look at it now, in adjusted defensive efficiency on KenPom. So will be a tough matchup for IU in that regard. They defend both 2s and 3s. They're top 50 in defensive percentages for both of those. So yeah, I think that's a big one. Ryan, what are you looking for in this game, coming off of a big win that we talked about earlier for IU to be able to knock off Wisconsin? What are going to be the early signs for you if IU is able to carry that momentum into this Maryland game?
How do they come out early on the road? I mean, it's can you carry the momentum that you had from that game where you finished it pretty well? You had a great first half for most of the first half, a bit of a lull at the end of the first half, which we've seen from them when they start fast. They sometimes, let the other team get back to them, or come back to the other team, I guess I should say, by not playing well. But I just think that it's going to matter how they start. Can they hit a couple shots early? Someone like Mbako or X or whatever, hit a couple jumpers, get everybody comfortable so it's not just a slog inside where Maryland is pretty good at defending. So I think that it's just going to be about how they start. And then, it's just sort of maintaining that energy and focus that we did see against Wisconsin. We have not seen that consistently from Indiana this year. We didn't even see it really consistently in that game. You missed out. You had about 5-7 minute stretch where that kind of got away from them. But I felt like it was much better against Wisconsin. Can you do that on the road? And can you do that for 2 games in a row, which, again, we haven't seen in a long time. So that's just what I'm going to be looking at. It's that effort, that focus, and just sort of playing like a team. Which we haven't seen much of from this team, and we did see, I thought, against Wisconsin.
Yeah, I think as you look at it, it's as I mentioned, it's Maryland's last home game, so senior day for them, which the 2 key pieces of that are Jameer Young and Dante Scott, who feels like he's been there forever. Young obviously has not started his career at Charlotte, but I think it's a game where if you can get off to a good start, not let a team get comfortable early, make a couple threes for a team that doesn't shoot them well. The last thing you really want is to see them, get hot early and be able to ride some of that momentum and the emotion that is inherent on senior day. And I think that largely comes back to how they can defend Jameer Young, a really tough matchup, a guy who's, some of the games that they have won this year, basically it's been him single-handedly willing them to victories in some of these games, and even keeping them in others that they've lost in close fashion. They've had a number of close losses lately. I mentioned they're 2-6, but they lost by 3 to Rutgers. They lost in double overtime to Ohio State, by 5 to Illinois, who they actually beat in Champaign earlier in the season, by 4 at Wisconsin. So, they've been right there in a lot of these games, just haven't had a ton of success. So, he's the guy that you really need to try to figure out how to stop. And what IU does defensively in terms of switching and some of those things where they put themselves in some disadvantageous matchups against a guy like Ace Baldwin by switching a bunch. Do you defend that a little bit differently with Jameer Young? And I think if you can slow him down, you should feel pretty good about what you have. I think IU's matchups for Julian Reese inside can make things a little bit tough on him as one of the other key Maryland offensive contributors. So it'll be interesting to see what happens and again, how this team deals with the success they had and comes back at it. But again, that game's 2:00 on Sunday on CBS for that one. So we'll be back to talk about it after the game, as we always are. Coach, you said you had something else, NIT, that you wanted to hit. I don't know if this is your way of announcing that Delphi Bracketology is branching out into NIT Bracketology, or if this is other.
I was going to say
in that regard.
NIT talk, Coach. NIT talk.
That's
the way to bring in the listeners right there.
Yeah. Well, no, it's an opportunity. I did not know this. I was at the Butler St. John's game, and I realized that Indianapolis and Hinkle Fieldhouse is hosting the NIT semifinals and championship game. And so I just wanted to share that. Look it up online. Tickets are $40. And whether you like the NIT tournament, if you're a college basketball junkie, Hinkle Fieldhouse is a must-visit venue. And for $40, you get 3 high-level college games or relatively high-level college games in a great venue. And I got 10th row side right behind a visiting bench as soon as I figured that out. So there's some pretty good low-level seats available. So basketball's basketball. I'm going to go. I'm going to watch the Elite Eight, and then on Tuesday and Thursday I'm going to be in Indianapolis watching that, and then Saturday watch the Final Four. I just wanted to share that because I was totally unaware of that opportunity for Indianapolis and Indiana people who live in Indiana. If you want to make a trip to Hinkle, it's just a beautiful old rundown facility that you must go to.
That's offensive, Coach. How dare you say that? No, but I will say the semifinals and finals of the NIT, while they don't mean anything to most people, they're usually pretty good games because it's the teams that usually just missed the tournament. And probably, if it weren't for the automatic bids, would have been in the tournament fighting in, somewhere or another. So they usually are pretty good games. I've a couple times wound up, just channel surfing, found them and been really entertained by them. So I would recommend too, if you have a chance to go, just go. It's college basketball. Have fun.
Yeah, I definitely did not know that. And I would echo what you guys said. I think there's a lot of times where there may be some teams that are kind of not really sure if they even want to play in it. Those get weeded out pretty early. By the time you get to the end, you've got teams who have really embraced that opportunity to be able to finish their season on a positive note, and it tends to be pretty competitive. And the other thing I'll say about the NIT, they were talking about this a little bit at the end of the Nebraska-Ohio State game earlier, was I assume it's just the 6 major conferences, so don't totally quote me on this, but the way they're doing it now, the smaller conference champions who don't win their conference tournaments are no longer getting auto bids to the NIT. The teams that are getting auto bids to the NIT are the top 2 ranked teams in the net who don't make the NCAA tournament. So what they were saying on there was that would essentially be Iowa and Ohio State if you kind of looked at bracketology right now. So not saying IU's getting into that part of the conversation, but in terms of, level of team, you're going to have some of that as you go through. So they've made some changes to make it. I don't know whether I love this, quite honestly, but definitely are finding ways to cram more major conference teams into the NIT, as is probably not shocking. Whether that's good or bad for the event or not, we can probably have a different discussion, but that's the way they've chosen to go. So again, kind of add some credence to the fact that it should be a couple of pretty good teams by the time you get to that point.
And one other basketball opportunity for people in the Indianapolis area, the Horizon League semifinals and championship are March 11th and 12th at the Indiana State Fairground. And that's Wright State and Oakland, some really good basketball. So if you're jonesing for some basketball in a year where maybe Indiana's struggling, just want to go see a variety of basketball, there's some availability with the conference tournament there in Indy and the NIT to continue watching basketball. Some great chances here in the state of Indiana.
Yeah, and as Coach probably knows from bracketology, the Horizon League is kind of crazy. There's a bunch of teams that are right in the mix. I just counted. There's 8 teams that are over 500 in the league, so a lot of parity. I feel like that tournament always has some weird upsets, but a lot of evenly matched teams should lead to some close games as you get into that one. So, all right. Well, now that we've done our public service about giving people good opportunities to watch basketball here, we're going to take a quick break, and coming up on Assembly Call Radio, we'll have that macro conversation that we've been trying to avoid a bit during the recent post-game shows. We'll dive a bit into the state of the program next, and so stick with us here on the Assembly Call. All right. Welcome, everybody.
Hey.
Some of a doubleheader right after Coach Marlowe, I think, was doing the work, recapping the Northwestern win for the women's team. And
what are they at right now? Are they 23-4?
I'm not sure of that. They announced the women's selection committee actually does a second top 16 reveal, which they did today, and IU was 14th in that. I saw, which seems somewhat strange to do it that close to when the actual selection show would be. I mean, I'm not saying I wouldn't take the help on the men's side if they want to do that, but but they were 14th today in that. So it makes you feel like take care of business at home against Maryland, put yourself in a good chance to be hosting games in the first couple of rounds.
Oh, by the way, since this is basketball adjacent, if anyone wants to, it doesn't like Darren Rovell and wants to read me dunk on him, go to thebigleague.com. I don't know if you guys, obviously Caitlin Clark announced that she's going to go to the WNBA next year today. And Darren Rovell, who's a sports business reporter and also an idiot, quote tweeted that and said, headline, Caitlin Clark chooses a $750,000 pay cut. And then people proceeded to tell him, well, she's not going to lose her sponsorships turning pro. And he said, well, she's not going to be getting the NIL money. And they were like, the NIL money is all endorsements. And he's like, no, you guys don't know how NIL works. A collective pays the players. And they're all, well, Caitlin Clark has been very open that she doesn't take money from collectives because she gets so much endorsement money. And he just kept stepping on his junk, basically, and making an absolute...
hate when that happens.
Just making an absolute moron of himself repeatedly. And never, at some point, if he'd just been like, oh, you know what? I didn't know that. I just assumed she was getting it from the school or the collective or whatever. My bad. Everyone would have been like, okay, he just didn't know. But he's a sports business reporter, and he didn't even know like how that worked. And he just kept trying to prove himself right. And Nicole Auerbach from The Athletic, who is awesome, was just in there just calling him an idiot the entire time, which that's absolutely true. So if you don't like that and you want something basketball adjacent, go to thebiglead.com.
Yeah, Ryan, you probably don't have this luxury, but I did unfollow him at some point in the past. And so now the only time that I come across anything that he tweets out is exactly the scenario that you described, where
Right.
he says something stupid
And everybody
and then,
dunks on him.
and then everyone takes turns taking shots at him. So that's really when he reinserts himself into my life. Which
I
is
will
always
say
enjoyable.
he lost well over 100,000 followers after that. I checked, but no, I do not have the luxury of unfollowing him, unfortunately. But yeah, that was just like, dude, just at some point, just say, yeah, I'm wrong. Sorry, I'm wrong. I got it wrong. That's all you got to do. And everyone would have been like, okay, it's women's basketball. Maybe that's not his beat, like whatever. But what an idiot.
All right.
And on that note,
Yeah.
it's segment 2. You ready?
I had
Andy?
I had to get a rant
Yeah.
in at some point.
I'm
right?
ready. I'm ready whenever you are, Coach.
All right, here we go.
This is Verdell Jones. What's better than an epic buzzer beater, the full court dribble, and perfectly placed pass to set it all up? And of course, celebrating with Hoosier Nation afterwards. So join Jared, Andy, Ryan, and Coach on an assembly call after every IU basketball game. Go Hoosiers.
All right. Thank you, Verdell. And welcome back to the assembly call. I'm Andy Bottoms here with Coach Brian Tonsoni and Ryan Phillips. May soon be joined by Jared Morris, depending upon how bedtime is going at the Morris household. But yeah, we've always at least tried to frame this Thursday show as a way where we could talk more about the macro versus the post-game shows, where we largely try to focus on the games themselves. Obviously, sometimes that works a little bit better than others, and it's hard not to veer from one into the other a little bit. But I think we've really tried to do that over the last few weeks, perhaps successfully at times, perhaps unsuccessfully at others. And so, this is kind of that chance to look a little bit at the, state of the program type questions at the macro level. And so, as I look at this, I think we can look at the first 2 years of Mike Woodson's tenure. I think it's fair to categorize those as good seasons. Made the tournament both years after a long hiatus, improved their seed from being a first 4 level team and kind of sneaking in during his first season, which at that point was a real win and a big step for the program. As much as we would all want to not be at that point where that was a big step for the program, it really was. And then last year getting up to a 4 seed and both years winning a game in the tournament, losing in their second game. And so I think there's good things to be said about those seasons. And I think this season, it's fair to say it's been a much bigger step back than anyone could have reasonably expected. I think even those who underestimated the losses that this team had from a personnel perspective would not have thought that things would have, dipped to where they are in some of the rankings and different things like that. And so fans seem split. I think you probably could have some argument about what the split is on the direction of the program. Feels like some people are ready to burn it down. Some want to stay the course and kind of everywhere in between on that spectrum. And so, the question that we're kind of faced with is where that leaves us as we head into the last few games of the season. And, so with that, get into a couple other pieces of this, but, Coach, how do you kind of view the totality of what Mike Woodson's tenure has been and kind of where things sit in your mind right now as you head down the stretch for this particular season?
Yeah, I just think that the basketball program is not headed in a good direction after 3 years of Coach Woodson. The question comes down to, does that deserve a 4th or whatever year? That's just very, very complicated. But Indiana basketball is not just about making the tournament. Indiana basketball, it should be about making the tournament and playing well and being competitive year in and year out. And we've had coaches that have failed to do that. And it's been a constant exercise of not hiring the right coach. And we have done that several times in a row. We've had some levels of success. We've been to a couple Sweet 16s. We won a couple Big Ten championships, and that coach had some off the court things that drove people nuts and was let go. And Archie Miller was a failed experiment, which I was wrong about for a long time until about year 4 when I finally saw the light. And I think we did not make the best decision in bringing Coach Woodson back. I think he's a great guy, a great iconic figure in Indiana basketball. And my worries was if he was. My main worry was if he's not good at his job, how difficult is it to fire someone that everyone loves? And we've seen it at St. John's. We've seen it at with Chris Mullen coming back and not being able to win. We've seen it at Georgetown with Pat Ewing, who won and got to the tournament, just like Coach Woodson's got to the tournament when he ran the Big East tournament, won that, but didn't then capitalize on that. And both of those schools hung on too long. I think Michigan's hanging on too long to Juwan Howard. That's seen a 5-year decline in basketball. I think there are a lot of things that are very similar to what's happening. And when you go back and look at the coaching tenure at Atlanta and New York, and some of the same issues are arising in the Indiana program, I just think that it's not working out. The question becomes, what's the right thing to do about it? And that's for Scott Dolson and everyone else. There's a lot of money being involved.
Money, yeah.
Yeah, the donors and their influence. But if we are just happy making tournaments and having an Indiana graduate coach our program, we're not a blue blood program. We don't deserve to be a blue blood program. We have to shoot for higher. And if the thought process is Woodson is the guy by those people who make decisions, then he better be the guy, and he better do well in the 4th year and recruit and get out at sectionals and do the things and adapt to the college game that he has not shown that he's really done, in my opinion. And we all want that. That would be the best solution, is that a big change this summer and a lot of things happen, and one of our favorite guys brings Indiana to an Elite 8 next year, and we all can relax a little bit. But it hasn't been there in this year, and you worry if you just hang on too long. So that's where I'm at. I'm going to root for Coach Woodson. I'm going to root for Indiana on Sunday, and I really would like for Coach Woodson to make changes this summer if he's around again and win. I'm not going to root against that, but I am very skeptical right now of the direction of Indiana basketball under Mike Woodson.
All right, Ryan, where are you at this point before we get into some questions about some of this? I'm gonna do my best to kind of play devil's advocate
Totally.
on some of these things, but I'll let you
Understandable.
answer the same question I gave to Coach, and then we can try to talk through it a bit.
Let me caveat everything I'm going to say by the fact that pretty much all year I've said I think Mike Woodson's going to be back. I don't know.
I agree.
I don't think that they're going to cut bait at this point, whether they should or not. I don't think they're going to. And I think that the winds have shifted over the last 2 months to where that's a possibility now, where it was absolutely not 3 months ago. And I know there is an upswell behind the scenes for why aren't we seeing changes? Why is this not getting better from a lot of people, administrators, former players, people around the state who are important, whose opinions are important to the athletic department. A lot of people are having the same questions as, how is Mike Woodson not seeing the things we're seeing and changing them? As far as the program, I think that the most important thing you can do as a coach in college is build your rosters properly, because you need the players to do anything. You can coach guys up, you can put it, but if you don't have the guys who can be coached up, who can fit your system, who can do the things, it doesn't matter. Indiana's roster construction is a disaster right now. In the portal last year, we all said they need guards and wings. And Mike Woodson went out and got Khalil Ware, Peyton Sparks, who are 2 big men. Now, look, Khalil Ware's great. I love Khalil Ware. But from a roster construction standpoint, having a 7-foot back to the center, who, by the way, should be playing more out on the perimeter as he's been showing lately, as your back to the basket center, while you have Malik Renew, who is basically, while you want to make him more of a versatile guy, he's basically a back to the basket center. You went out and got those guys. And who was the third guy you got? Anthony Walker, who is, he's not a direct post guy, but he's more of a front court player than a back court player. And you needed wings, and you needed scoring from the perimeter, and you needed probably another ball handler. And you didn't go get those guys. Now, I'm not saying they didn't try. They did. But when you don't get the guys you need, you don't blame the wind. It's your fault for not getting the guys you need. One of the reasons Tom Crean was let go, and it was a big thing at the time, was he was not getting the players that he needed, and they were going elsewhere. And he had not worked well with Indiana recruiting. It had changed. The wins against him in the state had changed. All of that. That was a big piece of why they let him go. The inconsistency was part of it. Some behind the scenes things were a part of it. But a big reason was he wasn't getting the guys he needed. You can't absolve a coach if he doesn't get the guys he needs. And it happens consistently. If you have a bad year in recruiting, you had a bad year in recruiting. But when it's consistent, and going into next year, they are going to have, they got one high school recruit this year. One. Maybe somebody else falls off a tree somewhere and they're able to like pick them up. But you're going to have to portal your entire a huge chunk of your roster next year. And that's the excuse people are giving for why they weren't at these two very important recruits games last night in the sectionals. Whether it matters that you're there or not from a big picture perspective, it matters that you're not showing. Your actions speak louder than words, and showing up matters. And when Mike Woodson, after his first season, didn't go to the Indiana State title game and watch those games, when coaches from 12 big schools were there and he was not, he was on vacation. I'm sorry, it's a bad look, and it shows you don't get it. And so the other head coaches have had long-term, deep, connected relationships with these top recruits, and you hear from people that Indiana doesn't do that. And so I think that you have to look at this situation and be real with what's going on. Indiana has talent this year, but has a horribly constructed roster. And to make it better next year, you are going to have to hit a royal flush in the transfer portal. Is that possible? Sure. Indiana has NIL, it has resources, it has recruiting budgets, it has all of those things. You could do it. Is it likely? Probably not. And the other thing is that a lot of transfer guys are short-term solutions. So what's the long-term play here? And if you're missing out on these 2025 recruits, your future is down the drain as well. So you're just going to have to portal it again and portal it again. And I am of the belief that you can't portal your way to a championship. You can go out and get guys to supplement the roster you have, but building a roster through the transfer portal is a fool's errand. You might, and people will point out one team that made a run or something. It's like, okay, but the Final Four is not a collection of teams who built their team through the portal. They might have a portal guy on their team, but it's teams that recruit really well, develop their players, and if they're missing, say, a point guard, they go out and get a point guard. You don't go out and get a point guard, a wing, a center, all of these things and expect to be really good. So that's my problem, is I just see like, okay, this offseason, they're going to have to go out and probably get 5 guys in the portal. And if they have one high school recruit coming in, and then it's next year, are they going to land any of these 2025 guys? If they're not showing up and doing things like that, they probably won't. So what's after that? You got to go portal again and portal again. So that's where I'm at with the program. I just don't see the future here. It feels like it's year to year and you're not building a long-term foundation. And if that's the case, this is not the way to do it and win consistently. You're right, coach. You might make a tournament even a couple years in a row, but you're not building a championship culture that way because the guys you're investing in are leaving before they have a chance to develop that culture.
All right, so I'm going to attempt to unpack different parts of what we've talked about here.
Can you remember anything I said? Because I talked for a really long time.
I definitely
No,
was
I didn't listen to
I didn't
halfway
listen to any of
through.
it. But,
I get it.
all right, so let's kind of talk about I guess I'll say the past portion of it, and then I'm going to kind of do it in past, present, future. So the past part to me is it fair to basically dismiss what he's done the last couple of years? A lot of people seem willing to do that. I think there's questions around how much of that was Trace, how much, whatever the case may be, for a program that hadn't gotten to the tournament at all. We can argue that they would have made it in the COVID season. They would have snuck in. We'll never know. They were right around the cut line on the night that they beat Nebraska in the Big Ten tournament to win the Big Ten tournament, essentially, many are saying. But, is it really fair to say you gave Archie longer than that, didn't make the tournament, didn't do those things, and now he makes it a couple years, has admittedly a very bad season? Is that I guess 2 questions. 1, is that fair? And 2, if it is, what do you think justifies that sentiment by a large portion of the fan base? So, Coach, I'll throw that to you first.
I think you have to evaluate the whole entire program, not just the past results would be my answer to those people who say, well, we made the tournament. Making the tournament as a 12 seed, we were 20 minutes away from not making it. I know you see what you see
in year
too.
one.
If I'm not, in year one. If I'm not happy, I'm going to find all the negatives. If you do like Woodson, you do think it needs to be fair, and the answer to your question is you need to give him credit for that. You're going to find the positives too. We're right at that where you're going to see what you want to see, and then so some of that bias you got to read through me tonight when you're listening to this, but. That first half of the Michigan game in year one was some of the worst basketball I can remember. I was covering it for Delphi Bracketology, and I was just frustrated that they didn't show up. And then you had X and TJD just take over, and then they won again, right? So you got a 12 seed, you win, then you get blown out. Next year, TJD and Hood Shafino have great years. You get to the tournament, you play, you win one game, you get blown out. That, to me, is not Indiana basketball. Was that better than Archie? Yes. But if the criteria for keeping Coach Woodson is, well, he was better than Archie, what are we doing? What are we doing? Archie was not very good. So I could have maybe been better than Archie, and I'm not good as a coach. So I think the positive criterias don't carry a lot of weight with me because I see the foundational things that Ryan talked about, the recruiting, the adapting the style of play to your team, getting toughness, all of those things that help you win and build that winning culture. The best thing Ryan said was championship culture. I don't know that we are doing that regardless of the past results. That's Brian Tonsoni's opinion. The other opinion is, and what people will see from out away from the system is, how can you fire a guy that's been to the tournament 2 years in a row and then had his point guard go down? And I think those are legit arguments. I just think there are some underlying things that outweigh those arguments.
Yeah, I think that those are fair questions to ask. I do. I do think that when we look at just results, it's like box score watching instead of watching the game. And we see what we see with our eyes, and it's a lost team. And I'll say this too. I think what sunk Archie was the fact that he was unwilling to change and alter his approach. He was so tied into his system that even when it wasn't working, he didn't make the necessary adjustments. And I'll say this too, year 3 was better for Archie. It was a trend upward. It looked like, oh, things are improving. Now that was a mirage, and there's a whole bunch of reasons for that. And the 4th year was bad again. This has been the opposite, where the first 2 years were decent and then fell off a cliff when he lost 2 NBA players and didn't replace them with, a point guard. Yeah, I mean, you got guys, but they haven't, done enough to fill those roles. And I think even more importantly, you lost a bunch of senior leadership too. But the problem is Mike Woodson tells on himself all the time. And I think that's the problem. He said, the other day, and it's a passing comment, but it just opened your eyes to his basketball worldview. And he said, when I got into the NBA, you only shot a 3 when you needed one. And now guys shoot them all the time. It's like, Mike, why are you saying that out loud? It's like you're surprised at the way basketball is played these days. Like, even if you believe that, don't say that, because it makes you sound so out of touch with reality, especially if you then take that comment and look at the way Indiana plays, where they don't do anything for shooters. They don't develop shooters. They're one of the worst shooting teams in the nation as far as the amount of points they get from 3-pointers and how they shoot at the free throw line. And it's been that way for 3 years. If Mike Woodson understood modern basketball, he would have brought in a shooting specialist as an assistant or something to develop shooters and make things better. And I know Liam McNeely's coming in next year. I'm scared for Liam in this offense that he will not be used properly and that he will not develop properly given what we've seen. Now, if we're going to hold on to Mike Woodson, which again, I think is probably the outcome if I'm looking at it, you can't run back the same thing. Like, there need to be major structural changes to the program made. And if he does that, maybe you feel encouraged about moving forward. And I said that after the Penn State game when we were in Bloomington. If you watched that blowout loss, and your first thought wasn't, oh my God, I have to change so much of what we do and we have to fix this now, then you're delusional. You are absolutely delusional. And so that's what I want to see from Mike Woodson if he's going to be around, is him announcing, hey, what we're doing, the offense we're running, the things we're doing, not working. We're going to change what we do. We're going to bring in different types of players. I'm going to bring somebody in who's really good at offense, knows shooting, and, reworks this. I'm going to, change the way I recruit. Like, let's, get some guys in here behind the scenes who are really good at this. And, because if he doesn't do that, it feels like he thinks he's entitled to the job no matter what he does. And so, and he's more beholden to a system than the actual winning of games, which is a problem.
All right, Ryan, we're going to have to put you on some kind of words restriction here for a little bit, or we're not going to be able to get through the rest of this. All right, so let's talk present.
It's like
now.
He's had some things to say on
we
this
talked
topic
about
before.
we talked about the past. I'm just joking, but I mean, people in the chat are not joking. All right, so anyway, so we talk about the present. So I think the one thing with this team that everybody who wants to push back on why this season has gone so far awry is not having Xavier Johnson. And so, Jared, your timing here is perhaps not impeccable.
The bat signal.
Unfortunate, perhaps for you. But so I think that's one thing that gets thrown out. Having him was the Jenga piece that everything kind of caused everything to fall apart. So how do you juxtapose that with what you've seen with him on the court versus off, and how much of a factor do you think how much of this season's trouble is fair to attribute to his multiple absences over the course of the year?
A pretty decent amount. I mean, I think we're lying or obfuscating the truth if we don't admit that. This team would be better with Xavier Johnson. How many more wins would they have? Who knows? I think they would have at least 2 or 3 more wins, even if you just have the Xavier Johnson from this season that was erratic, because that's kind of the track that Indiana was on, with him playing good in half of his games, bad in half of his games, and then missing the others. The unknown is, if he doesn't get hurt and he is able to get back into a rhythm, is he playing a lot better now than he was early in the season? We'll never know. I completely understand why Mike Woodson wonders about this stuff and stays up at night thinking about it. This is what coaches do. I don't know why people criticized Woody for that comment. He was just being maybe a little bit too honest. The problem is, even if the team is 2 or 3 games better with Xavier Johnson, it doesn't solve all these other underlying issues that we're talking about. So those two things can be true. It's like people last year that said the team wouldn't have been better if X hadn't gotten hurt. Are you crazy? Like, it's not a coincidence that our best defense under Woodson was the first year when Xavier Johnson was healthy the whole season. So you can criticize X and point out all of his flaws and all of those things, but the team is better with him, but it doesn't fix the underlying issues. And that I think is the big problem here is, number one, you built a roster that was so dependent on him. That in and of itself is a problem. We all knew that in the offseason, that he was going to be such an important piece, and that you didn't have a backup plan, and that everything fell apart without him in there. That's a big issue. To me, and I've really wrestled with this. You guys know that I've wrestled with this. We all have. Because I think it's very easy to make a case for Mike Woodson deserves a 4th year because he made 2 NCAA tournaments. He achieved some real stuff for this program that hadn't been done, beating Purdue, doing all this stuff. But this is big-time college athletics. And so you can put over here on this side, okay, the coach, I can make an argument why he deserves a 4th year. But the other discussion is, yeah, but can we do better? Because we now have 3 seasons of evidence. And if you're going to go into a 4th season with a lame duck coach where that staff, necessarily their focus is going to be on self-preservation this year. We got to focus on the portal and hit a home run this year, potentially to the detriment of the future of the program because the incentives are misaligned. So you have to think, okay, Woody deserves a 4th year, and him deserving that 4th year is stronger than my belief that we could do better and have someone in place who would be taking care of the future of the program better. That's the problem. So it's not this binary of you hate Woodson or you don't. You think he doesn't deserve a 4th year or you don't. Like I think I can make a case that he deserves a 4th year. I also think Indiana could do better. And I think in this era of college basketball, with so much at stake, with all the movement and all the things that are happening, and that being Indiana's biggest brand, how long can you afford to have this program mired in mediocrity? And so if the opportunity cost of a fourth season is a more proven coach who is going to be incentivized to have the future of the program in mind, I get it. Woody's a legend, and you would like to see a guy who deserves something get it if you believe that. And there are also arguments for why he wouldn't deserve a fourth year, and I'll hear those. That's fine. But, you would really have to go against, in some ways, the best interests of the program to give Woody, to give a legend kind of what you think he deserves. And so to me, if we keep Mike Woodson, I will support him. I will, obviously, just like we always do. But to me, that will indicate that there are priorities higher than winning driving the decision-making in Indiana for basketball. I just don't know how else to look at it right now, because I think it's fair to expect that there would be better options, more proven options at this level of college basketball than Mike Woodson if we chose to open up the coaching search.
I'm going to say something, and let's be real, this doesn't exist in reality, but it's what would be healthiest for everybody involved. Mike Woodson's status as a former player should have nothing to do with whether or not he gets another season. What he's done at Indiana as the head coach should be the only thing he's judged by. Now, I know
he got the job because of that status, and that should be enough. He should keep it because of that status.
Absolutely, because if you start putting those old emotions into it, you're clouding the actual facts of the case. And while I know, I said it when he got hired, that if he had the same record as Archie Miller after 4 years, he was absolutely going to get a fifth year because of who he is. That should not be the case, though. Just like I think you shouldn't hire somebody solely because of who they played for or whatever. Now, I know that happens. It's happened. Indiana is not the only school who's done that. But that should not be the deciding factor in who you hire, and it should not be the deciding factor in who you fire. You use track record and all the available information other than that to make your decision. If it happens to be, somebody who's, has that pedigree, amazing. But that should not be the determining factor. It shouldn't even be considered.
Yeah. Indiana's best game short of beating Wisconsin was Kansas without X. And then you win 2 Big Ten games without X. Would this team be better without X? Absolutely. I think there's no argument. Defensively, pushing the basketball. We saw that in the first half of Wisconsin when he was at his best, and he got back to a little bit of struggles in the second half.
Even just for depth as a backup, that would help make the team better.
But that just speaks of the concern of evaluating the program where it's at now. It's like, what happened? Those same guys then went to lose when he got hurt the second time, to lose games. That group is not playing as well. That's a concern when you talk about the X factor, right? That those guys did play good basketball or better basketball in December, and now X gets hurt the second time, and you lose 15 points at home to teams that you probably don't want to be losing to. So there's that. And I think you guys said it really well. I think coaches deserve longer time. I've been pro-coach to a fault, even on this show, and I think that it is inherently unfair to not have a chance to fix a down year. If he had 3 bad years, I think it's a no-brainer. But he had a marginally good one the first year, got us to the tournament, outstanding year, and then a really poor year. I do think it's fair to give him another year if changes can be made. And so the onus is on the athletic department and whoever is in the decision-making realm to really sit down with Coach Woodson and see where he's at philosophically with the program. That's recruiting, that's player development, that is everything that needs to go on. And if it could help build Indiana successfully, then give him a 4th year, because then he's willing to make those changes. If he says, no, it's only X's injury and it was the kids didn't make 3-pointers, and he's in that conversation in a professional meeting, then that might be the signal that, hey, this guy's not going to change. And if Woody doesn't change, we're back a year. If he's back for the 4th year and doesn't change and it's more of the same, we're in a little bit more trouble, a lot more trouble. But if he can, to some extent, I think he deserves that 4th year, even though I'm not happy with the direction. So I think it's just a really interesting dilemma right now for Scott Dolson and the powers to be.
I think, Coach, you express an interesting middle ground that I buy into, which is, if Woody truly would say, okay, I'm amenable to changes, whether that's bringing in an offensive coordinator, right, that we've seen a lot of people do. Maybe it's bringing in a GM or a recruiting coordinator that's going to oversee all of that stuff, take some of this off his plate so he can kind of be more of the NBA head coach that he's used to being and do the stuff he's good at. I would be much more open to a fourth season, because now, to me, you've got something to kind of buy into, and maybe this could be different, because here's the other big problem here. And I'm not sure if this is something they've talked about on X's and Joe's yet, or if this is something that Mike and I have just talked about. I know they're planning it for an episode. But, when you look at the history of coaching hires, it's a really, really bad sign when a coach does poorly in their third season. If a coach does poorly in their first or second season during the honeymoon period, not as big of a deal, and Woody was close to that. Coach, I heard you talking about the Michigan game and how close we were, but to his credit, they won, and he deserves credit for that. Having a year this bad in year 3, where the honeymoon period is over and, the recruiting kind of starts to take a dip, just historically, it's really hard to turn it back around, And so that's where, to me, even though you say, I believe he deserves a fourth year, you would be doing that for reasons other than winning if you're going to look at this kind of from a pragmatic standpoint. And that's the problem. What I hate about this, what I really, really hate, is where you talk about this and then people are like, well, you've never supported Woody. You don't like him. You don't want him to win. Like, it is about none of that. That's ridiculous. It's straight basketball. And it's looking at the empirical evidence to try and suggest what is the real hope here moving forward.
And you objectively were very positive on Woody. Or you tend to be that.
I'm always going to be very patient for 2 years.
Totally.
I think coaches deserve it. And then year 3, because of how important year 3 is, that's when I think you have to start being a little more critical, because that really sets up the future of the program.
Year 3 is the prove it year. It is. Yeah. And I hear a lot of people say, why did people have so much more patience with Archie Miller? It's like, after year 2, we were saying he needed an offensive coordinator and the pack line, you got to loosen it a little and all that. Like, we saw the writing on the wall that it wasn't going great. But then in year 3, he was on the track to make the tournament. And so you see more of a positive development, but we were still skeptical of it. I mean, you can watch, I went back and watched some of our off-season shows then. We were absolutely skeptical he was the guy. And it's the same thing. You see it with your eyes on the court, and you see it with your eyes on the court that there are just things this program doesn't do that other teams in college basketball that are successful do.
All right. So I want to look at a couple future things here. Ryan, I tried to make fun of you earlier for the longest quote 1-sentence rebuttal in the history of sentences, but I had muted myself, so I shot myself in the foot while trying to make fun of you. So I guess that's what I get.
Swing and a miss.
All right. So anyway,
there were lots of commas, Andy.
So there was a lot of commas, maybe a few ellipses in there. Who knows?
Look, anyway, I'm a writer. We can squeeze that out of anything.
So, all right. So the two things I really want to talk about as you kind of move to the future looking part of this is a little bit of what you started to get into in terms of, what he would look at. So, one big thing is the roster, right? You're going to lose Khalil Ware. You're going to lose X. You're going to lose Anthony Walker for sure. Just, mark those down. That's done. They either don't have eligibility or would be absolutely nuts to come back in the case of Khalil Ware. So you've got that. So that's really one thing. So how do you, and I understand the NIL resources and all of that stuff. You got to go hard at the portal at this point, and you really can't miss because you're going to end up with, presumably 4 or 5 guys from the portal to really be able to do that. So that's me. If you want to look at concerns, the roster needs a lot based on what you're losing. I think what happens with the roster will also tell you more about how this team will play next year and if a style of play change is coming. If they go out and get people that suggest Malik Renew is playing the 4 again, coming back, and really eliminate some of those chances for playing a little bit smaller, I think that tells you that they're, that those roster decisions tell you if there is or isn't going to be some kind of style of play change to address some of the concerns. 2 is just a volume of impact guys that you have to get. Because when you look down the rest of the roster, you're still sitting in the situation where you have very few guys that are going to be coming back that what you can expect. Mackenzie Mbako, I think, is a question mark in terms of whether he would come back. They talked about that a little bit on the latest episode of X's and Joe's with Sam Story. So there's a lot there. So, Coach, I'll throw this to you first. I mean, how do you just view all of the roster things that need to happen in order to get this team to turn back around? Because it's going to tie into expectations, which is my other thing I want to talk about from a future standpoint before we try to wrap this up. But like, how do you even go about the amount of roster changes that need to take place to get from where this team is right now and this program is right now to a spot that would be acceptable in year 4?
I don't know, Andy, to be honest with you.
Well,
there
damn
could
it.
be
We need you to figure it out.
I got Andy to cuss at me. This is prime viewing right here. Yeah, it's going to be more than the number you think. To be honest, that scares me too. We don't know the underclassmen who might decide to head elsewhere too. So if everyone's back, there's a large number that needs to be replaced. And if everyone is not back there, then it becomes can you fit 6 or 7 players from different programs into a year and have that magical year? The reason Indiana was good last year is you had senior leadership, you had 2 pros, and you had a pro that was there for 4 years in his 4th year. And Ryan was correct, and I have to say that, when he said,
I get it how hard that was. It's fine.
No, you're really more correct than everyone gives you credit for. And now I even forgot what you were correct about.
Easy to do when no one gives him credit, Coach. So it's okay.
No, but where was my point on this?
Sorry, I interrupted.
You were giving us the answer. You had this figured out. Come on.
No, you were talking about a 4th-year guy, coming back and doing that.
Or no, where you say it's just you have to have a lot of roster 2, 3, 4-year guys, and then fit 2 or 3 portal guys in. That's how you win and use the portal. I think that was you that said that, Ryan, right? You can't go 7 portal guys. Or there have been a few examples. Kansas State did it. Jerome Tang did it in year 1. Like, you really have to be dynamic in coaching and molding your team. I don't know that you can go get 7 guys that all fit the way you want to play, which is heavy ball screen, heavy post, heavy isolation. You have to, if you're going to stay with that. Or has Coach Woodson demonstrated this ability to take 7 guys, mold them into one in one quick year, with the excuses that have been made about we're still learning each other with 4 games left and they're slow to get to the defense? Aren't we going to see a repeat of that? We have not seen a new roster put together that developed quickly this year. So what gives us pause about next year? But I think you got to identify your style of play. I think you got to find the players that will come here and not necessarily look at the top 10. You need a good point guard and you need a couple top end transfers, but there's some good mid-level transfers. We're seeing a ton of that in college basketball right now, where guys were really good at Southern Illinois or whatever, and they come in, they're making a huge impact at Big Ten schools. So you've got to widen your net a little bit to get 4, 5, 6, or 7 guys that'll fit. But I think that's the major thing. You can't just go for the 2 or 3 top, and when you don't get them, then you're just going to take some other players down the list. I think you really have to be focused on a lot of different types of kids to bring in if you really want to make it successful and mesh for a year.
Ryan, give us one sentence on what IU needs to do in the portal.
No. Land everyone, basically. That's it. That's what I say. No more Zoom calls.
I'm kidding. You can expand. I'm just joking.
I mean, they need to hit an absolute royal flush, grand slam, whatever you want to say. I mean, they're going to have to nail 4 to 5 guys to be good next year. I mean, you assume Malik Renew's returning. Other than that, what do you know? Gabe Cupps and Malik Renew are the only guys.
Galloway's more likely to stay than he is to go.
We've heard some things on that. Like, I agree it's more likely than not, but we'll see. So let's say we have 2.5 spots that are contributors filled. You're gonna need a bench too. It's not just the starters. You're gonna need a bench that contributes. You're gonna need, and Indiana hasn't really had that. And they got to hit 5 guys who can all play at the Big Ten level and contribute and score and shoot. I mean, who was the last team to do that? Indiana has the resources, and we said early, could they do that? Yeah, probably. They probably could. Will they? I mean, that's asking a lot. It's asking a lot.
And you got to focus that portal. You can't just take the top guys come in and like this year, we have good guys, but they don't fit.
Yeah, exactly.
It was the discussion in the preseason that we have 2 5s and a 4 out there playing basketball, and we don't have any 2s. I mean, the roster construction, you got to be focused on getting a balanced roster. And when you got to get 4, 5, 6 guys, that's more difficult than I think any of us would even try to understand.
Yeah, and I think, Jared, before I throw it to you, I think that's ultimately where the biggest challenge is to me. You've got, I think the window for that is a little bit shorter this year than it has been in the past. And you really have to line up the dominoes that you're going to get in order to make that work. You know, it's not breaking any ground to anybody to say the biggest needs this team has is dynamic backcourt and wing players. Now, Liam McNeely helped solve some of that on the wing, but you really need an upgrade in the backcourt to what you thought you were going to get from Xavier Johnson this year, and you really can't miss there. For as much as Galloway has improved as a playmaker and that you hope he's back, I think he could use some of those skills, but in a lesser role on the team. And to me, that's what you've got to get first. I think that's kind of the inverse of what they did this year. They were able to get Ware early on, and that kind of dictated some other things that you would do. Like, you've got to get the backcourt figured out early. And so in a world where there are tons of guys in the portal who everybody's trying to go after, your coordination of how those pieces fit together, who you get first, and all of those things become really important and really difficult when you have to get that many guys. When you're looking for supporting players or guys to plug a very, 1 or 2 specific holes, you don't have the same dynamics aren't at play. And so as you look ahead to the future, like, that's what concerns me, is the amount of overhaul that there needs to be on the roster. So Jared, thoughts on roster construction before we move to the last thing I wanted to hit on from a future looking perspective.
Ryan, you want to talk point guard real quick, and then I'll go?
Just one thing. I mean, when you look at it, because we're talking about X a lot, and if you look at when the team was the most successful was when Jalen Hood-Schifino was on the floor. And what shot did Jalen take a lot of? Long twos, in which he made. Jalen didn't get to the rim as much as he pulled up. And so this offense wasn't at its best when the guy was getting to the rim. And it's not that he couldn't get there. It's that the floor wasn't open enough for him to get there. And the best option most of the time was for him to take a long two. And he's one of the only players I'd ever be okay taking that shot because he hit it a lot. So,
and to be fair, he usually got into the mid-range. He usually weren't always long twos.
I mean, you're right, but there were pull-ups, basically, is what I'm saying. It wasn't at the rim. And so that's when the offense was most successful. Xavier can't do that. And so maybe part of the reason this offense hasn't been as successful when he's been in charge is because you can't get to the rim with how packed that offense is. So do you go and get a portal guard who can pull up? I mean, you may have to with how clogged the lanes are and things. And so it's just an interesting look that you would figure off the pick and roll. You're either getting to the rim and getting a dunk, or you're popping and getting a shot. Instead, with Indiana, when it's been the best, has been a freshman guard pulling up from 15 feet. So,
And herein lies the problem, Ryan, which is that we are getting to the end of year 3, which is when this should be starting to reach a crescendo. And we're having conversations questioning the very foundation of the offense that we're running and suggesting that we might need to change it, and trying to figure out how to hit a home run through the portal, not really knowing which one of these 2 areas that we're going in. These are not the conversations successful coaching tenures have at the end of year 3. They just usually aren't. And that's part of the problem here is, again, just everything is pointing in a direction that usually sinks a program. We talk about they have to hit a home run in the portal. They are probably going to have to fill 5 or 6 spots in the portal. That if you just kind of average things out and what are we expecting, it's probably going to be at least 5. I know work has been done, in the background already, because that's how college basketball is right now. But the history, even just the short history now of teams that have had at least, I think, 5 portal guys, it's not good. Arkansas, everybody points to Arkansas. They're not good this year. They've had some season, Arkansas had a season or 2. Kansas State had a season or 2. But if you're looking at those as as the ones that you're banking on, that's survivorship bias. Look at all the rest of them that haven't. That's the problem. So Andy, someone asked me today. It's like, well, what if he goes out and hits a home run in the portal and we are second in the Big Ten and we make the Sweet 16 and we put a couple more guys in the NBA? Aren't you going to look back on this conversation and think it was all a little bit ridiculous and overblown? And I was like, yeah. I mean, if we could do that, that'd be great. Now, please go find me someone who would credibly say that that is a reasonable possibility. Because the needle that we're trying to thread, once again, we talk about in games, Indiana's trying to thread this needle where they have this very narrow path to victory. And every now and then it works, but man, most of the time it doesn't. Well, this is just the same thing on a macro level. And so, again, like it's not this binary thing. You can say that he deserves the 4th year. You can say you're intrigued to see if it could happen. There is a path where it could work. But is this what we want after year 3? If we say that Woody has done a good job, is that enough? Don't we want a coach who does a great job? So that's the problem here is it's, you can still say these things about Woody and give him credit for all the things that have been done and even say, okay, here's the path where this could work. And I'll be charitable and say, maybe you can make this work. But what if option B, C, and D over here are all very much more likely and it's easier to point to how that's better for the future? That's the complexity of this. And on social media, it gets all simplified into, binary things. And that's not what this discussion is, And so every time we come up here, it's like we just hit this roadblock of, I guess that could work. But, is that our slogan next year? Indiana basketball. Yeah, I guess it could work. I think we can do better. Yeah. That's where I keep landing.
The other thing that's really good about what you say, too, is let's say the best situation happens and we get to a Sweet 16 and we hit the portal. It's likely that a lot of those guys are 1 year or 2 years, and then you got to do that again, right? So Is that a long-term plan for 5, 6, 7, 8 years to get Indiana back where we all want Indiana back is to have 1 year shots without, getting that foundational recruiting base and only then getting 1 or 2 portals to supplement, right? We have not seen that. That's the big part of where I totally agree with you is it is now quicker. I always used to say give 5 years, but with NIL and the portal and things like that, and then listening to X's and Joe's, the historical point, 3 years is a really solid window that this program should be in better places than it is right now. And yes, it might be sentimental to give that favorite son another chance, but there are also history, just like the portal stats that you said, there are history with NBA coaches going back to their alma maters and hanging on and just staying way too long. So it's a tough decision, and I know it's a heated decision, and people on both sides, but I do think you have to take away all of that stuff and look at what's best going forward for Indiana basketball. And if that's giving Woodson a 4th, then it better work out. It has to.
Yeah, so that's a good segue to the other future thing I wanted to talk about, and then we can wrap this segment up. It's expectations. So assuming that he comes back, that's really where this question becomes important, right? And this is something that whether it's X's and Joe's talking about chip stacks, whether it's something Scott's brought up on Crimson Cast a number of times, like there's an element of once you have disappointed or had a bad year or whatever you want to categorize this as, you got to do something to really overcorrect for that. And I like what do you, Jared, I'll let you go first this time since I saved you till last the other time. Like, let's assume things go the way that they need them to in the portal. Let's assume, or even if they don't, after the way this season is gone, like what are the real expectations going to be for this program, and are they attainable based on what we know at this point? I just think the expectations are going to be through the roof because you have to get back to where you, at a minimum, it feels like get back to where they were last year to easily in the NCAA tournament, top seed, whatever. And then that allows you to say, look, this year was the aberration. Very clearly. I think much short of that, it becomes difficult to point to this year as the outlier, as the anomaly.
Andy, this is the question that I've had a hard time with, which is why for so long I've been saying.
So glad I
it's a
asked you
fourth
first,
year. Well, no, but I think this is the issue. It's like, okay, let's say that we get on board with this and there's an offensive coordinator brought in and like all this stuff that we want to see happen. And we're like, okay, it seems like Woody's ready to make a change. Now, what are the expectations? I mean, I think what you laid out, Andy, should be perfectly reasonable. I mean, that is such a low bar for the fourth year of a coach, but it would be reasonable to expect. But is it actually reasonable to attain? I mean, we didn't just drop to like 50th in Ken Palm this year. We're 102nd. I mean, like the bottom fell out of this thing, and we're going to have to rebuild some core pieces there. So, I mean, I understand what we should expect, but what's reasonable? I don't know. And the problem is, Andy, again, it's year 4. So it can't just be, okay, you've got to win this many games, you've got to be here in the Big Ten, you've got to do this in the NCAA tournament. It's also about, and what kind of foundation is being laid for the future. Because if you just sell out, get to a Sweet 16, get back to second in the Big Ten, but then we're doing it all over again next year, that's not successful. So there's a whole lot there. This is where I keep coming back to is whatever expectations are reasonable, I don't really think they're attainable. And so what are we doing? I don't know, you know, and maybe people disagree with that, but like this program has really fallen this season. And there's a lot that has to be done to rebuild it. I mean, it's kind of a 2 or 3 year rebuilding job at this point if we're going to do it in any meaningful, sustainable way. And so that's where I think this question is really hard to answer. It's just in any way that's going to shine a positive light on Mike Woodson, which I would like to, believe me. But I can't credibly argue something that I just can't really make sense in my mind.
Ryan, your thoughts on what the expectations would be heading into next season and the predicament that ends up, you know, putting around this whole thing.
I mean, at some point in the first 4 years, you've got to hit the Sweet 16, right? You know, and if you can't do that, what are we doing? It's not just, well, we got back to the tournament. You know, like, why is that the bar? Why are we lowering it that far in your 4th year? And I get they lost a lot last year, but you have the resources to figure that out, and you didn't use them properly. Just like I don't think you're using your recruiting days properly. And, you know, I mean, look, if you're going to talk about it, like, again, and I think that this goes to expectations, is you raised expectations by going after all of these top recruits for this year, all of these 5 stars. And you went to Montverde, God knows how many times, to watch those guys. And you went after all these 5 stars. And that's great. I love that you go big game hunting. I think that's that. But if you don't land those guys, you have to have a backup plan. And Indiana has 1 recruit coming next year. Again, you raised the expectations. When you stepped to that podium in your first, you said we're chasing championships, not I'm getting us back to the first round of the NCAA tournament, maybe the second, and then then whatever happens sucks. So if this is not a program heading towards a championship, or at least where you can see that on the path ahead, you don't have to win it in the first 4 years, but you have to see the path towards it. What are we doing? Like, why are you here? If it's just to limp back into the tournament every couple years, you know, maybe 2 out of every 3 years, and be in the top 4, 5, 6, 7 of a crowded Big Ten. I mean, why do it? Why continue to do it? That's not what Indiana basketball should be. And you look right up the road and you've got a team that is dominating the Big Ten and had, you know, even though they got bounced in the tournament and we all laugh about it and all of that stuff, before Zach Edey got there, before the COVID season, 3 years in a row, 2 Sweet 16s and an Elite 8 and 2 Big Ten championships. They're doing it. Why can't Indiana? So that's how I feel. If you're not moving towards that, it cut the cord as fast as possible.
Coach, thoughts on the impact of expectations heading into next season?
You know, I don't know. I just will repeat what everyone said. The expectations were, I need to figure out how I'm going to get excited. I'll be here. I'll do the show. I love being on Assembly Call. I love Indiana. I will root for them. I really liked going down and covering games, but I'm not sure I'm going to drive 2 hours until I see some true results that things have changed. right? 2 hours there, 2 hours back on a Tuesday night. I would do that in a heartbeat in most years. But that just tells you where I'm at. I'm not giving up. I'm not quitting on the Indiana basketball program, but I'm disillusioned. As a fan, as an alum, I'm disillusioned about the direction of the program. The expectations are that you are in the top 4 of the Big Ten every year, and I will give you leeway when you start a couple years to get there, and then to make a tournament and to play well in the tournament. And I know the outliers should be when you're on the bubble, and the outliers should be when you have an injury and it is devastating and you're still competitive like we were at the beginning of the year, not here towards the end of the year. The expectations are, I know it's been a long time, I know people make fun of us all the time, but it's Indiana basketball. It was what Bob Knight brought us. It's championship basketball. In his worst years, we were having bad losses in the first or second round. Now we're celebrating just getting to the first round. That saddens me, and I hope before my time is done that we have championship culture. Whoever said that on the panel tonight, kudos to you. Championship culture. And I don't believe we have it. The expectations would be to get that back, whether it's Coach Woodson or another coach, to get that back as soon as possible. And if we have people who are good enough in college basketball and want to come here, I think we need to do what we need to do to get them here, whether that's now or in a year from now or 2 years from now, because our fan base is fantastic. We got 342 people here listening to this show. The fans deserve it they just do after the year. And we don't want to lose it forever, what we had under Coach Knight. So the expectations are more than just a Sweet 16. Championship culture immediately. And I just don't know where that's going without some sort of change with the current staff, wholesale changes in how they operate. And they won't say it publicly, but they need to make sure Dolson and everyone else believes it. And then we need to see it with the results or a coaching change. But we need to change this mediocre, I can't even speak, mediocre way that we're doing business. And someone said it's not a hump, it's a mountain. We got to get over the mountain. And the mountain's been added to, not cut down under Mike Woodson.
You know, Coach, you said something there that was interesting, which is you're going to keep supporting the program. You're going to keep cheering for the program, rooting for them. That, we're all like that. Like, this is in our blood. The people who are still here right now, it's in your blood. Because if you had better things to do, you would probably be doing them right now in a season like this. And so I think we're all there. And the fans have been there with Mike Woodson through these first, 2.9 seasons, whatever it is, have been supporting him, have been trying to give him the lift he needs. But what fans want is more. Of course, we're going to cheer and support. What we want is to believe in our coach. What we want is to trust our coach. And the reason why you saw all that stuff coming out last night, because they weren't at the recruiting events, that no one made a peep about that stuff, really, certainly not publicly the first few years, when things were going and there was trust and there was belief. That was the biggest manifestation, well, maybe not the biggest one, but certainly a manifestation of the lack of trust. Because you see this happening and the first thought isn't, it's okay, they got a plan. They're doing something. It's, oh my gosh, this is out of the ordinary and I don't trust that the staff is doing it the right way. That's hard to pull back from. And that's something that you can't fake. No fans went into this saying, oh, I'll give him 2 years, but year 3, I'm going to turn on him. No, it happened because of the things that we've seen, the buildup of red flags, the buildup of poor performances. It's a very visceral feeling. And it's not something that you can just shift with words at a press conference or, promises in the offseason or even with the portal. And again, like we said, a lot of coaches don't come back from it. That's the unfortunate part. But it's not fans wanting that to happen. It's just because viscerally in our gut, we've stopped believing and stopped trusting. And that's a hard way to watch. We'll watch and root and be there for the guys, during games and cheer as hard as we can for them. But that's one way to be a fan. And the way Indiana basketball fans know and expect to be a fan is to also have some belief and some trust. And right now that's gone. And I'm not sure what the path is for this staff rebuilding it. As tough as that is to say, because we like a lot of them personally. They're great people, good families. It's uncomfortable for me talking about this stuff in public because of that. It always has been. But, it's big-time college basketball also. And so, there's a lot at stake. It's an urgent time. And that's why all this is coming to a head right now.
All right. Well, that was perhaps the longest segment in show history. So we've got that going for us. But anyway, like we said, felt like a good time to talk about it. So we'll take a quick break, come back, answer a few questions, even though we're running a bit long. So stick with us here on the Assembly Call. All right.
Well, that was uplifting.
There we go.
I like
That
this
was-
producer role. I could just go, just end a segment by hitting the music whenever I want. It's kind
There you go.
of powerful. If
Yes,
I don't
you can.
screw it up.
Well, we'll be fine. If you want to do a couple of these, I'll stay for the bracketology one, and then I probably go.
All right, okay, one thing I just wanted to say, and maybe we can make this kind of the capper on this real quick. It seems like there's 3 general options. One is he deserves a 4th year, and I'm going to give it to him. 2 is he deserves a 4th year. I don't have a lot of belief in it, but if they can show a reasonable path toward changes, whether it's bringing in a new coach or whatever those changes might be, I'm willing to be open-minded to it. That's option B. And option C is I think we can do better, and I'm ready to move on. I'm in the category of C. I could be persuaded. There's a chance I could be persuaded on B, but I'm in the category of C at this moment.
Yeah.
Just to put it out there where I'm feeling.
I've been there for a few months, as you all know. I think you all know. I've been there for quite some time.
I was there. I was at C 3 years ago.
Coach, come on.
Look,
I mean, no, but what I'm saying is, but we all
we're willing to give it
yeah,
a chance. Yeah, we're all
You know what I'm
willing to
saying.
give it a chance and hope. No, I think that.
I apologize.
Yeah, no, Coach.
3
we
days
know.
ago.
We know you're kidding. But no, I think that I was. You guys know I was very skeptical of the hire, not because necessarily Mike Woodson specifically, but because of NBA guys in college. It has not a good track record, and had he been a college assistant for 7 years and then gone to the NBA and knew his way around, maybe, I would have felt differently about it. But it had less to do with Mike Woodson and more to do with what I know about NBA guys in college. And it's a poor track record because they are different games. It's the difference between men's basketball and women's basketball, or baseball and softball. Like, it's a different game with different types of players and different rules and all of that stuff. So I was always skeptical, but I gave it a chance. I praised him at times last year for the way that he handled that veteran team, having a freshman point guard, all of that stuff. And I praised him for aiming high in recruiting. I did. I mean, I did think they should have backup plans, but I praised that strategy. Like, hey, you're Indiana. Sit at the big boy table. I get it. Go. Do it. But I do think I've always thought I see a guy who was a coach in the mid-2000s and the early 2010s and runs a system that looks like the NBA in those eras, which the world has moved on from. And that's concerning. It's really concerning.
Andy, where are you?
Yeah, I don't know. I struggle with trying to, like, I try to keep it more in the reality of like what I think will happen, which is probably him being back. Because I still feel like that's the more likely scenario out of those. Now, whether he's one who is, going to make some of the changes that we talked about, I just, I feel like that also seems hard to believe, right? Like, we heard about what he wanted to do offensively. I think everybody chalked up the offense in the TJD
race
teams to be, hey, this is what he had. And I think even to a certain extent, people did the same thing this year with like, well, you kind of had to take Ware if you could get him. He's one of the best guys in the portal. That's proven to be 100% true. In terms of what his, what he's ended up being. And so, but at a certain point, like, how many years do you get in before it's like, okay, this has to be what you want to do? Like, there can't be other excuses. Like, this is the offense that you want to run.
He was criticized for the same thing with the Knicks.
Yeah. And if it is, like, that's what I know. I know, Tony, I think somebody had posted that and we sent the video around. It was jarring to watch the video of like some of the stuff with the Knicks and kind of insert things here. And I think that ultimately is the biggest challenge for me. And I guess what would make me lean toward, C probably more so than B, because it just seems more realistic, I guess, in some ways, because I'm not sure you get him to do something so different. But, Coach and I have talked about this before. I mean, while you don't have to watch games to do bracketology, it certainly helps to have watched some of these teams play, and you watch enough teams from different leagues and how they play. And I would say this for a lot of teams in the Big Ten too. I don't think this is a unique IU thing. I think it speaks to why the Big Ten does how it tends to do in the tournament. Like, you can turn on a whole bunch of teams and they don't look anything like what you see from IU, and they don't look anything like what you see from some other Big Ten teams. And I think that's the part that's hard. Is then the math part of me comes in and is like, it becomes a math problem that's hard to solve, where you feel like you're starting out every game down 15 points because you're not going to get enough from the 3-point line. You're not going to do whatever. And just the burden that puts on how well you have to be able to play. And I think the roster stuff for next year is a huge deal. Like, to be able to really pull off both getting the players in the portal and getting those guys to play together. We've heard Patino talk about some of that stuff, right? Like, they went hard at the portal and got a bunch of guys. Now, he took also a bunch of up transfers and different things like that. Yeah. But a guy who's widely regarded as one of the best college basketball coaches that there has been has really struggled to get those guys to put it together. And some of those guys he coached at Iona. And so I think that just becomes hard. I'm not sure that anybody has a great track record of doing that. And you can look at the top teams this year, and they all have transfer guys that are playing a role, but very few of them have even, I mean, there's a handful that have two guys playing somewhat major roles. But you don't have really any that have three or more that are being counted on to play key roles. And how do you stay out of that cycle of that's what you have to do every single year? But it's that's why I asked the expectations question before, because the expectations are going to be so high that you have to do that next year. You have to get that many guys in the portal. You don't get the luxury of saying, hey, I got a couple guys in the portal and these guys, and I'm building towards something. Like, that building argument is gone. And I think that's what makes bringing him back, no matter what camp you fall in, that's what makes it really, really difficult.
He'll have the hottest seat in the nation next year.
Yeah.
Given the size of the program and everything.
I just feel like that's hard to come back from in those ways. So I guess I kind of lean C as what I guess I would think has the best chance of success right now. But I also acknowledge that feels maybe unfair is the wrong word. Like you said, Jared, it's big time college basketball and whatever. But that's kind of why I tried to, ask that question earlier with, like, is that really fair given how bad everything had been for a while to be like, yep, you had one really bad year and it was really bad. Like, is that really fair to do? And that's where the reality portion of it comes in, is like, how do you do that? And that's why
it sucks,
I'm not getting paid to be the athletic director.
Yeah, that's what the money and the buyouts are for, to help
Matt Doherty at North Carolina.
It's perfect.
It had to be hard to do.
And
they
I would just say
years,
real quick,
right? He had 2 years with that, right?
I think he got 3.
And then they had a chance to get Roy, so they went and got him.
And Andy, I would just say real quick to echo what you said. I thought you described why I'm a C even better than I did, which is I would really like to be a B. And I'm just not sure I can conjure up the combination of words and sounds and images,
the mental gymnastics,
that would make me believe it. That's the problem. I think it's just to do that and also build a foundation. Like, I think it's a needle that is just too difficult to reasonably expect to be threaded in any way that is going to be comparable to what a new coach at the level I think Indiana could get would be able to do. And that's where it's just an opportunity cost, and in a job like this, after 3 years, if you can reasonably see a better option, that's the AD's job. He's got to protect the future of the program. Woody wants next year to figure it out next year, and that's great, and I would love to give it to you, but I'm sorry, it's better for the program to do this. And that's why it's hard to not be a C, I think.
Yeah, and I think that stuff is where you get into That's kind of why I was, scrolling down the list of some of these top teams this year, at least using Ken Palm or bracket, whatever you want to look at, right? And trying to look and see where that is. At that point, getting all those guys to mesh is not a Mike Woodson issue and not a commentary on Mike Woodson as a coach. It is a commentary on anybody who has proven to be successful this year to really do that. And even some of the teams who have multiple transfers, there's some of them who have been in the program for a year. So like Alabama as an example, like Mark Sears, he transferred from, I think, Ohio. He played a role last year, but it wasn't as much. Now he's a huge part of what they're doing, but he didn't necessarily have to do that coming in year one. And so that's where it's not even a could Mike Woodson do this question. It's could any coach do this question?
Yeah.
That's where it gets difficult. And then you're at that point filtering in your own thoughts on what you've seen from him and whether he could do that or not. It's a tall order for anybody based on when you look at what's on the roster, who's proven what, and what you'd have to do. That is a tall order for anyone.
Yeah. The best coaches in the country he would struggle for. Well said. One thing I always come back to with Mike Woodson is he showed up on campus having not coached in college in his entire life and not been in college since he was a player. He had Thad Matta, one of the best resources available to him, made available to him through a really nice salary and a great setup for Thad Matta. And Thad Matta really loved Indiana and all that stuff. And Mike Woodson did not utilize that resource. And Thad Matta, he left to go coach, but he left after 1 year having not imparted any wisdom. At least that's what I've been told repeatedly from different sources, that Woody just didn't use him. And the reason why is because he'd been in the NBA. He knew better. The NBA is better than college. I know what I'm doing here. And it's just so disappointing because the things he could have learned from that guy, or the things the rest of the staff could have learned from that guy, or the things the players could have learned from that guy, endless. And it was wasted. I mean, that was basically just lighting money on fire, quite frankly. And it's so disappointing. Just so disappointing.
It's unfathomable. It really is.
All right.
Longest segment 2 ever.
Yeah.
Ever.
I mean, I don't even know that we need the intro music for that. If we want to hit this bracketology question, I can give some quick thoughts on that.
Let's just hit a few questions. We'll dismiss the
All right.
formalities of segment 3.
I'll do the bracketology one, and then I'm going to drop, and I'll let you take over, Jared, if you want. But so this first one, question for resident bracketologist. Clemson coach Brad Brownell recently claimed the Big 12 is manipulating the net rankings. Many of the teams schedule a lot of sub 300 teams, keep their starters in, win by 30, 40, 50 points, thus creating a very high net efficiency rating. Then they get to conference play and beat each other. They have no bad losses. Is that legitimate scheduling or gaming the system? Should it be modified to minimize teams beating down inferior opponents? I thought that, Coach, I'll let you give your thoughts. I thought Joe Lenardi had a really good thread about this today on Twitter. Maybe it was yesterday. At some point in the last 2 days, had one about it. And I think with any system, you could make tweaks to the net that it would cap some of this, or find ways to handle it differently than it has. I would also say that lots of teams schedule games against bad teams and don't beat them the way that they're supposed to beat them. And it, to some extent, the sign of a good team is that they can beat those teams on a consistent basis. Not necessarily every game, but more often than not to do that. And I do think in a league where you know that you're going to be able to get enough quality win opportunities, you probably can take some of those gambles. And sometimes coaches take those gambles because they know what they're up against from a roster perspective or conference perspective. So I use Cincinnati here locally as an example. Now they've kind of played themselves out of the tournament picture, but they were in it for a while. They scheduled a pretty poor non-conference because they needed to get wins. It's not Wes Miller's first year, but it's their first year in the Big 12. They knew going into that league they were going to need to stack some wins to be in any position to play in the postseason, and then hopefully get some things together, play well in the league, and see what they can do. They did that for a while. They had some good wins, just not enough. And so they've kind of played their way out. But sometimes that makes sense as a scheduling philosophy. But I would be remiss to say that everything about the net is great, but it's better than the RPI. And the RPI is still telling you some of the things about the Big 12 versus the ACC that it would be. And, so I think there's things that you could do about it, but I don't necessarily view it as gaming the system. I think there are plenty of ACC teams who also play poor schedules and haven't been able to do it. So Capel today was out, spouting some of this stuff for Pitt. Their non-conference strength schedule is terrible as well. So you did the same thing. You didn't do as good a job of it. You can't get pissed at the other guy for doing a good job of it. Even if you think that's wrong, it's hard to argue that you didn't try to do the same thing. So I think there's a lot of hypocrisy out there from coaches who want to get mad about that stuff when they would, if given the opportunity, do the same damn thing. People did people game the RPI. Conferences game the RPI.
Coaches say a lot of stuff to take the focus off a mediocre record.
If there's something out there in a way that somebody's going to try to work around something, they're going to do it. So I don't know. I just think that I think it's probably a little bit overblown in terms of that. I think you can watch some of these teams play and the whole, the ACC had this record against the Big 12. I think if you look at some of those games, I'm not sure you can draw quite the same conclusion as that just record in and of itself would tell you. And I think if you peel that back and look at those leagues' record against other power conference teams and different things like that, I think it doesn't quite tell you the same story. But it's like anything, you can find a stat or a number to prove your point if you want and kind of move on from there. But I think it's a little bit overblown, but would like to see some changes to that and just generally some more transparency into how the net is calculated so that you could really understand if what you think is happening is actually happening. I think in this case, it's somewhat fair because it correlates. The net tends to correlate better to the predictive metrics, which like that kind of stuff and allow for that kind of stuff as you go through and do it. But you are having to exceed what those models say you're going to do in order to really move the needle in that way. So, I don't know. That was a long-winded answer, but Coach, I'm not sure if you have other thoughts on that or
it's just the word of the day or the grievance of the day is the net from these coaches, right? So I put this out on our Delphi Bracketology Twitter today. I said, "Is the Big 12 gaming the system?" Yeah. Okay, which metric is better to predict who should be ranked, KenPom or the net? KenPom. And okay. Do you realize that KenPom has the Big 12 ranked higher than the net does? So there's no reasonable statistic that says the net is that unfair. KenPom was just talked about going in the Hall of Fame. He's so well respected for his stuff, and we love it. It's good. These things are good, and they're used. They're not scoreboard. That's the one thing that everyone just – it's not if you're 32nd, you're better than the 33rd. The NCAA committee takes all of this stuff into account. And I also then say, go compare to the RPI where Yale is 7th or something right now in the RPI nitty gritty.
Is that not correct, Coach? I'm not paying attention to bracketology. Is Yale not the 7th best team in the country? Is that
no? And so the net is
really
imperfect.
Really breaking intellectual ground here.
The net is not perfect, right? And there could be some adjustments, and yeah, let's maybe try to figure that out. But it is a heck of a lot better measurement than what we had before, and it actually combines. What KenPom is just efficiency only. The net is a little bit of efficiency and a little bit of the strength of record RPI stuff. I don't see what the whole big issue is. So,
Coach, I believe you were saying that Utah State is 7th in the RPI.
Was it Utah State?
On
well, wasn't Yale up there?
Yeah. Yale, Princeton is 20th. Yale is 25th. The RPI loves the Ivy League apparently. Right. So,
yeah, Utah State.
Duly noted.
Dayton was 4th. Noted. It was some small school out there.
Yeah, Dayton was
Yale's
4th.
25th. That's where Yale is 25th as a second team in the Ivy League in the RPI. Don't be mad at the net.
And
it's
we're
all about getting that.
To be clear,
Championship
Yale
net.
is not the 25th best team in the country. Is that
That also is correct.
okay? Thank
Or
you.
the
I just-
eighth.
again,
Or
not a
the eighth.
bracketologist, just for the laymen out there.
This is going to be a recurring segment. Ryan trying to figure out where to place Yale in the hierarchy of college basketball. Okay.
Tournament
Ivy
day is
League
gonna be
race,
really
Ivy League race
fun.
though, coming right down to the wire, 3-way tie heading into the weekend. So just
And they are not
right.
playing their conference tournament in Indianapolis area. So unlike the NIT or the Horizon, they're playing it out east. Just public service announcement number 2.
absolutely. All right. All right. Well, I'm gonna drop. I'll let you guys finish what you want
See,
to
Andy.
finish.
Thanks for
I have
handling
some
things tonight.
bracketology thing. Yeah, thanks for dropping me in with this one. This was like
I didn't want to. It's just
yeah. It'll be,
I got here as quick
I'll
as
just
I
be on a
could,
little bit late.
promise.
If you could just try to control Ryan through talking about the state of the program, that'd be great.
Sorry.
Andy, no,
I just
no
have a
offense
one-sentence
to-
rebuttal. Go take a 15-minute nap while I give this one-sentence rebuttal.
It was a long sentence, guys.
Andy, I
A
tell
lot
you
of
what.
semicolons.
Yeah. No offense,
Oxford
Andy, to
commas.
the other people on you're fielding the 68, but you just elevate that show when you're on. I'm obviously biased, but the other day I kind of got lost with whoever was on that on Monday. So you and Lucas are the two that we do appreciate.
Well,
your work.
I believe he and I are the two that are on tomorrow. I know I am on tomorrow. I cannot speak to everyone, but I believe he is also on with me tomorrow. So
Good
Look at that. Our buddy Quinn, again.
Hello, Quinn.
With a super chat. Quinn, you're the man. He said you came up my recommendation, or it came up that y'all were live, so I figured I'd pop in. War Eagle. Quinn, again, we talked about this on the last postgame show. If you didn't hear, Quinn is an Auburn fan that,
Me too.
I interacted with in the Trilly Discord, the Trilly Donovan Discord. We're gonna have a whole episode to explain what that sentence means, and maybe we'll do that at some point. But Quinn's a great guy, and he's now been here for 2 straight postgame shows. So we're
And Quinn
developing
is
quite the
definitely-
relationship here with these Auburn
Quinn is
fans. which
definitely
great.
Bruce Pearl, right? Like we've established that. He's just coming to hang out.
His agent.
Yeah.
He's just hanging out here. Okay, they say
Test-
these fans are kind of
I
crazy.
mean, I know
Let's see how
I
crazy
know
they
he
are.
doesn't spell his first name the same, but a little bit. I mean, should we be concerned that his first
Oh,
name
well, maybe
and last
that's
name
someone-
are
someone
tied
else who
to
may be
two
involved.
two
War
high-level
Eagle.
IU point guards? I'm just saying.
Quinn, all you got to do is text Coach Tonzoni. He'll tell you everything that's coming.
Yeah.
He's
Absolutely.
he's a hero.
All right, I'll see you guys later. And all
right, Andy.
we'll talk soon.
Have a good one, man. Let's see. We got a few more questions. You guys want to answer one or two more?
One or two more.
Yep.
is great.
One or two more. Okay, we'll go quickly.
We're now in
Sam was
45
here,
minutes.
so-
in, so.
So let's do this one. We'll plug again X's and Joe's. Make sure that you subscribe to that podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Also check out our friends at Doing the Work. Also check out our friends at Crimson Cast. If you haven't subscribed to their Substack yet, I saw Galen dropped a video that is normally just for VIPs, but he made it for everybody. So subscribe to their email list because you get all that stuff. But Mark's question was, listen to X's and Joe's. And Coach Sam Story, who was here in the chat, suggested that Mackenzie Mbako needs to play a lot more games to improve and suggested he would get more from the G League or overseas. Any thoughts on that? When he came here, he said he wanted to be a one and done, and lots of conversation on, then he's talking about not being out to recruit. Okay, we already talked about that. So Mackenzie Mbako, I had to stop listening, so I actually haven't gotten to that part where they talked about Mackenzie Mbako, so I didn't hear exactly what was said, although he summarized it there. Ryan, what are your thoughts on that? Because Mackenzie is definitely one of the biggest wild cards.
Yeah.
Like, he has not played like a guy that would be a one and done, and he's not on mock drafts, but it still is obviously very possible that he either would transfer or go somewhere. Although we'd love to have him back.
I think it's and I think his improvement over the past 2 months has been pretty significant. And whether it's not he's consistently scoring or whatever, he's moving better on defense. It's still not elite. He's been driving more and asserting himself more, where he's more doing jump shots early in the year. He's running out on the break more as well and looking for opportunities.
He's a legit
there.
Big Ten player now, and he wasn't playable early in the season. That's growth.
Exactly. And scouts are going to see that on film. Maybe they're not into him right now, but they'll see that on film. I think there are two possibilities for him. One, he comes back, plays a sophomore year at Indiana. It depends what his relationship is to the coaching staff at this point. I think that's one. And also what he thinks the team is going to be like next year. He doesn't want to play on a team that's not winning games and is not competitive because it's going to make him look worse. I mean, a perfect example is Thomas Bryant, his sophomore year. He would have been a top 15 pick if he went out the year before. He stuck around for another year. He thought he wasn't old enough, thought he needed to mature. The team was terrible, and he dropped to the second round. It wasn't because Thomas Bryant got worse. It was because looking at that situation, people downgraded him. That is
He looked
possible.
so sad at the end of that season.
I
it was
know.
so different from
I
the
know.
joyful Thomas from the season
And we
before.
loved Thomas too.
I love Thomas
but,
Bryant.
But I'll say this: I think that there are three possibilities. One, he comes back. Two, he goes to the NBA and just tries to work out for teams and show them what he's got. Reminds them he was a 5-star product who looked like a top 25 pick before he came to Indiana. And three, that he gets in the portal and looks to play for a higher level team. He was recruited by Kansas. He was recruited by a bunch of other high-level teams before he picked Duke, and then his second recruitment came down to IU and Kansas. There are other teams who will watch his development this year and be interested in him. And so I think that, and there'll be NIL and all of that stuff involved. So I think those three things are all possibilities with him, and we have no indication of which way he'll go, which we shouldn't at this point. I think he'll put his name in the draft and do the workouts. Why wouldn't he do that? There's no downside to doing that. So I agree that his best path to development is probably in the G League, playing every day with professionals and to have a full-time development schedule. You are hamstrung in college, how much you can work out, how much you can practice, all of those things. The NBA, once you get out and you're a professional, you can work out whenever you want. You can do whatever you want. You can work with coaches. You can work with outside guys. Now, you can, with the team, you're limited, but you can hire guys to work you out all the time, and you don't have to worry about school and all those other things. So I think that is probably, if you want to talk about what would rocket his development, yes, it would be something like that and being a professional, especially with the things he needs to work on.
And he's already got the frame and the body for it.
Yes.
That would prevent some guys from doing it.
Yes.
But he's got that part. That's why he was such a highly regarded recruit. And he can shoot. Coach, any thoughts on that?
No.
McKenzie? All right, let me scroll through these. We can't get to all right, so we got some questions about the NIT. Let's hold those until the NIT actually becomes realistic. We got to win one or two more games, and then we'll talk about the NIT questions and whether Indiana would go, all of that stuff. Last question from Bill, Coach. Why is the defense worse this year than last season? And look, there's a lot of reasons, right? Like, I think, when you sub in McKenzie and Mbako for Miller Kopp, that's a huge downgrade. Miller Kopp was a very good team defender, right? When you don't have Xavier Johnson healthy and at his best and not, the same athletically as he was his first year with Mike Woodson, you're not putting the same pressure on the ball. Khalil Ware is a good rim protector. Trace Jackson-Davis last year was an elite rim protector. Race Thompson at the 4, a much more consistent and reliable defender than Malik Renew is at the 4.
Rebounder.
Yeah, so I mean, like, just, player for player, you just kind of look at it, it's like, man, just the individual guys just aren't as good. And then kind of the overarching thing above that then, Coach, is they haven't played the defense with the same energy and conviction that you need. That's why it was so stark against Wisconsin. It's like, wow, these guys are flying around. It's like, okay, that's how you help make this work, And we haven't seen that. So the personnel hasn't been as good, and the commitment to the defense hasn't been as good. That explains what has been a quite precipitous drop in defense.
Yeah,
and maybe
I
there's
think
more
you're spot
nuance
on.
that you can add to it.
No, I think that's spot on. I do think it comes down to ball pressure. I think Cups does a good job of that. But you had Cups, and then you had X, and then you can bring in Cups. You don't have that when that's a big piece of that. That's
because Woody's first year, he had Rob Finney to come in off the bench and keep the ball pressure high.
You had
between
two
he and
outstanding
X all game.
Yeah. So depth, I would say depth, defensive depth is not there. But your part about every position is a step down, or maybe 2 steps down from who they replaced. As he wasn't the quickest person, but yeah, I just say it's a step down. From Miller Kopp wasn't quick, but he was in position. He fought like crazy. He was really good on the drives.
And he talked.
And this is where you combine the roster construction stuff. those guys had played a lot of basketball. Some at Northwestern, some at other places. They had played a lot of basketball. They had a defensive mindset. Race Thompson was just a tough guy. I don't think we recruited tough guys. I like him, and again, it's so hard for me to be overly critical of young guys who wear to Indiana University, but Malik Renew's not tough. He's talented and skilled, but he doesn't guard well. He doesn't close out well. He doesn't pursue rebounds. He doesn't block out at the level that you would need to be a dominant 4 or a dominant 5. Ware is pretty good defensively and rebounding because of his size. Cups fights like heck, so does Trey, but I don't think McKenzie enjoys playing defense. I don't think Renew enjoys playing defense. And so that's why the defense has fallen. Now, I also think, you got to go to scheme as well, that, you've seen Woodson play a little more zone. There's some other ways. Again, one of the criticisms is, so you have that. How do you still play effective defense to win games? And a lot of coaches say, we're going to play our system, we're going to play our system, we're going to play our system, and it's up to the guys to get better. Some people like to win and say, you know what, I got some slow defenders or I got some not in tune defenders, so we got to put them in this position because maybe I can get a little bit more out of them. Yeah. It's just all around been a struggle. The guys off the bench have not been very good. C.J. Gunn in spurts has been good. His length should have been good. You thought Caleb Banks would add to that. I don't think just depth of defensive positioning and knowledge. They tried to switch a lot this year, and the communication and the understanding of what to do. Either it's been difficult for the players to get, and it's on the players, or it's not been a well-coached scheme or produced scheme. But you put all that together, we're 100 and something defensively, which is just unbelievably a drop-off from 48 that it was last year. And that's what I attribute it to. So many different pieces that have made it a struggle.
Yep. All right. Well, that's probably a good, appropriate note to end on for this show. Jeez. Let's go get a win Sunday. I say all of that, and as soon as Sunday comes, I'm gonna. You're gonna do songs? Okay.
I didn't know. You said it was an appropriate way to end. I hit the ending music.
No, let's do it. Let's do it.
Here we go.
That works. All right, that's going to do it for us on this edition of the Assembly Call. If you want to see us do the show live, join us at assemblycall.com on Thursday nights for the live broadcast of our Assembly Call radio recording. We always thank Bob Thompson for producing our music. We always thank John Ringer of rigdesign.com for designing our logos. And we always thank you for being here. We'll be back Sunday after the IU Maryland game with the post-game show. Until then.
Take it from me, Yogi Ferrell. Keep your elbows in and your eyes on the rim. And go Hoosiers.
Coach Tonsoni is always right about basketball.
Fair.
Oh, man. All right. Well, there we go.
That was fun.
There we go. Yeah. That was fun.
So,
did you guys talk about Caitlin Clark?
I talked about Darren Ravel.
Oh, gosh. Why?
So, in a way.
Dude.
What an idiot.
Gosh. But, man, Caitlin Clark.
Ron.
What is Grace Berger thinking right now? She's going to be on team with Caitlin Clark and Aaliyah Boston.
She's thinking, I'm not going to score a whole lot of points.
Yeah, but anytime she wants to go get her shot, she'll be able to get it.
Yep.
I mean, think about her operating in the mid-range like she does. I mean, my goodness. They're going to be good and fun, man. Exciting times for Indianapolis basketball. Between the Fever and the Pacers. So, that's nice. That's nice. I like basketball. Well-played basketball. I do. All right. Ryan, you have any stories for us for AC After Dark, or is it?
Nah, we have to plan that out. It's also been 2 hours. I think they've gotten enough show tonight. I'm just gonna. I think there are people on the podcast just looking at the phone.
They've gotten enough. Let them eat cake.
No, there are people. There are people
show.
literally looking at their phone right now. As they're listening. When does it end?
I'm pulling that. That from now on is how we're going to end every show. I think they've gotten enough show. Put that on a t-shirt. Jeez.
I'm sorry if you're listening. You guys have had enough tonight. You know what? There's going to be a night.
250 still here.
There's going to be a night where we have like 45 minutes worth of content. We'll save AC After Dark for that. Okay. We have off-season shows. Yeah. So.
All right. Well, you heard him, folks. You've gotten enough show.
You've had
So
enough.
That's
You guys have had enough. You're full. You've had dinner and dessert. You don't need another dessert.
Dang.
Jeez. Okay. All right. Well, that's fun.
That was fun.
All right.
All
I'm
right,
ending
we'll
the
talk.
recording.
Do it.
End it before Ryan says something
Recording over. Here goes the stream. See ya.